After 19.5 years of marriage, I finally said the words that made her stop, smile, and cry all at once. The morning sunlight slanted gently through the curtains, dust motes drifting lazily in its warm glow. I watched her from across the kitchen, standing there in a soft, well-worn sweater, the sleeves pushed just above her wrists. She moved with that quiet, effortless grace she always had, picking up the coffee pot, humming softly to herself, unaware of how much I adored the simple way she existed in the world. There was something about mornings with her that felt timeless, as if the world outside could disappear entirely and we'd still be here, in this quiet bubble of familiarity. I poured the coffee, the rich aroma filling the small kitchen, and handed her the mug. Our fingers brushed, just for a moment, but it was enough. That little contact sent a shiver of warmth through me, the kind that didn't need words. It was the language we had built over nearly 2 decades of shared mornings, dinners, and quiet nights. She smiled at me then, that gentle curve of her lips that had always made my chest tighten. I noticed the small details, the way her hair caught the light, the faint freckles along her forearm, the softness in her eyes that could convey both amusement and concern without a single word. I felt a wave of gratitude, thinking about how far we'd come together, how 19.5 years had passed with laughter, mistakes, growth, and love. We moved around each other in the kitchen like a well-rehearsed dance. She reached for the sugar, and I reached for the cream, our elbows bumped, and we laughed softly. There was no urgency, no noise from the outside world. Only the smell of coffee, the warmth of the mugs in our hands, and the steady, comforting rhythm of our lives together. I paused for a moment to watch her sip her coffee, noticing the faint crinkle at the corner of her eyes, the way her lips pressed lightly to the rim. She glanced at me and raised an eyebrow, playful, questioning, yet intimate in the way only someone who knows you completely can be. I leaned closer, letting my hand brush hers again as I passed her a plate with a small croissant. She caught my gaze and held it just a beat too long, a silent acknowledgement of something unspoken between us. In these ordinary moments, the love we shared felt almost sacred. There was no need for grand gestures. Our connection had been built quietly over years of shared mornings, of small touches, whispered jokes, and the steady presence of someone who truly saw you. Even now, as I watched her, I felt a flutter of something new, a quiet excitement, a gentle anticipation. Today wasn't just any morning. Today, I had something to say, something that would make her laugh, maybe cry, but above all, remind her, and me, of the incredible journey we'd taken together. And yet, I lingered in that moment, soaking in the warmth of her presence, the soft sunlight, and the quiet rhythm of our lives. 19.5 years had taught me patience, appreciation, and the beauty of noticing the small things. And in that still, ordinary morning, I realized that even after all this time, just being near her was more than enough to make my heart feel full. As the morning light shifted across the living room, I found myself staring at the small gallery of photographs on the wall. Each frame told a story, a fragment of the life we had built together. There we were, awkward and young on our wedding day, smiling nervously at the camera, hands barely touching. I could still feel the nervousness in my chest, the thrill of discovering someone who could make my world feel suddenly bigger. She stood beside me, graceful even in the faintly oversized dress she had worn that day, hair pulled back carefully but effortlessly. I remembered how I had traced the edge of her hand with my thumb, marveling at how something so simple could feel so monumental. And now, years later, that same hand rested lightly on mine as we moved around the kitchen, our fingers occasionally brushing like whispers of memory. I drifted through the mental scrapbook of our early years together. The tiny apartment we had shared, walls bare except for a few hastily hung pictures, the way she had taught me to cook, laughing when I burned the toast for the 3rd time in a row. Our first argument, small and silly, had ended with her resting her head against my chest, letting the rhythm of my heartbeat calm her. The lessons of patience, forgiveness, and love had been learned quietly, in small moments that accumulated into something extraordinary. Her laughter rang in my ears, clear and warm, as I remembered late nights spent talking until the streetlights flickered out, revealing the vulnerability we only shared with each other. There had been moments of fear, of wondering if we could truly make it through the challenges life threw at us, but every struggle had been softened by her presence. She had a way of seeing the world that made me feel safe, even when I was uncertain of myself. In that moment, I realized how much these memories mattered, how they carried the weight of 19.5 years of life, laughter, tears, and unwavering connection. Our love wasn't flashy or hurried, it was steady, patient, and profoundly human. The kind of love that could survive ordinary mornings, arguments, and the inevitable passage of time. As she reached for my hand without looking, fingers curling around mine, I felt a quiet thrill. It wasn't a new excitement, but a deep, familiar one, the comfort of knowing that, after all these years, we had truly built something enduring. And as we sat together, silent but together, I understood that these memories weren't just the past, they were the foundation of every moment yet to come, including the one I was about to create for our anniversary. The morning had passed in a comforting haze of sunlight and quiet laughter, but as afternoon crept in, a subtle tension began to stir. I could feel it before I even realized it, a slight pause in her movements, a faint frown that didn't quite reach her eyes. We were discussing our anniversary plans, something trivial, yet suddenly, a small disagreement emerged. "I thought we'd just keep it simple this year," I said, trying to keep my tone light, but there was a hint of hesitation I couldn't hide. "Maybe a quiet dinner at home." She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but with the faint trace of disappointment. "I know. I just thought we might do something special." "It's a milestone, after all," she replied softly, the warmth in her voice tinged with a vulnerability she rarely showed. It was only a minor clash, almost laughable in any other context, yet in that moment, it felt heavy, charged with the unspoken fears that sometimes lingered between us. I noticed her fingers tracing the edge of the counter, tapping lightly in a rhythm that mirrored my own racing heartbeat. My mind wandered for a moment to all the years we'd spent together, the laughter, the arguments, the quiet reconciliations. How delicate yet strong this bond had become. I reached for her hand, letting my fingers brush against hers. I don't want to mess up the day. I want it to feel right," I admitted, my voice low, carrying the weight of my concern. She exhaled slowly, and in that simple breath, I saw the vulnerability she usually kept tucked away behind her confident exterior. "I know. Sometimes I wonder if we still notice each other the way we used to," she confessed, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. Time seemed to pause as our fingers intertwined, the gentle warmth of her hand grounding me. I leaned closer, resting my forehead briefly against hers. "Every day," I whispered. "Every single day, I notice you. Even when we're busy, even when life feels ordinary, I see you. I always will." Her lips curved into a small, tender smile, and I felt a flutter of relief and affection. That tiny conflict, inconsequential in any other context, had become an opportunity for honesty, a bridge to deeper understanding. We stood there, holding each other in the quiet afternoon light, letting the small tension dissolve into the comfort of touch and presence. I realized, once again, that love wasn't just in the grand gestures, it was in the soft glances, the brushing of hands, the willingness to be vulnerable with someone who knows the real you. Our age difference, the years between us, didn't matter in moments like this. Her experience, her wisdom, and her quiet courage intertwined with my youthful earnestness to create something enduring, resilient, and profoundly intimate. As we pulled back slightly, our hands still linked, I felt a renewed sense of gratitude. 19.5 years of navigating life's little storms had brought us here, to this moment of gentle understanding. And in that, I knew our anniversary would be more than just a date on the calendar. It would be a celebration of every small touch, every shared laugh, and every vulnerability we had ever revealed to each other. As the day shifted into evening, the sunlight softened into a gentle golden glow, spilling through the dining room windows. The table was set simply but with care, her favorite linen, polished silverware, a single vase with fresh flowers she had chosen earlier that week. There was a quiet intimacy in the way she moved around the room, adjusting a candle just so, brushing a stray hair from her face. I watched her, heart swelling with a mix of admiration and affection, noticing details I had loved for years, the curve of her neck, the faint laugh lines at the corners of her eyes, the calm grace in every movement. I carried the last plate to the table and hesitated, my fingers brushing hers as she reached to place a glass. The contact was fleeting, yet it held a world of unspoken connection. Our eyes met, and in that shared glance, the familiarity of 19.5 years felt both comforting and thrilling. There was an anticipation in the air, subtle but undeniable, as if both of us knew tonight was special beyond the ordinary rhythms of life. Dinner itself was quiet, punctuated by soft laughter and the gentle clinking of silverware. We spoke of small things, memories of past anniversaries, the absurdity of our first apartment, the tiny victories and mistakes that had shaped our shared life. I could feel the warmth of her hand brushing against mine across the table, a silent reassurance, a reminder that in all the years, some things never changed. Between bites, I watched her, the way she sipped her wine, the way her fingers lingered on the glass, the subtle tilt of her head when she listened intently. It was in these small, ordinary actions that the depth of our bond revealed itself. The world outside could fade entirely, leaving just the two of us, suspended in a bubble of quiet connection, laughter, and warmth. My mind wandered, rehearsing the words I would soon speak. 19.5 years, it felt strange to announce such a precise milestone, yet somehow it felt right. I could sense the gentle flutter of anticipation in my chest, a nervous excitement that mirrored the first time I had confessed my feelings to her all those years ago. I stole a glance at her, noticing the way her eyes caught the candlelight, shimmering with curiosity, perhaps even a hint of expectation. As the meal ended, I reached across the table, my fingers brushing hers again, holding her gaze for a moment that stretched long enough to feel significant. She smiled softly, a mixture of amusement and something deeper, something I couldn't quite name, but recognized instantly. My heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the quiet thrill of closeness, the subtle tension that had been building all day. And in that gentle pause, surrounded by familiar sights and smells, the aroma of her favorite dishes, the soft flicker of candlelight, the warmth of her presence, I knew it was time. Time to break the quiet comfort of the evening with words that would honor the years we had shared, the love that had grown quietly and steadily, and the milestone that would make this ordinary anniversary feel unforgettable. The anticipation hung between us, subtle yet electric, and I knew that whatever came next, the words, the smiles, the laughter, maybe even tears, would be a moment we would remember forever. The room had grown quiet, the soft candlelight casting a warm glow across her face. Every detail was magnified in that moment, the delicate curve of her lips, the faint shimmer in her eyes, the gentle tilt of her head as she studied me, curious yet patient. I could feel the weight of the years pressing softly against my chest, a mix of nervousness, anticipation, and gratitude that made my heart beat faster. Tonight, the ordinary became extraordinary, and I was about to mark it with words. I took a deep breath, letting it steady me, and reached across the table to take her hand in mine. Her fingers were warm, familiar, comforting, and as our palms met, I felt a quiet courage settling in. I had spent all day thinking about this moment, about how to capture 19.5 years in a single sentence. And suddenly, the words came naturally, simple but full of meaning. "We've been married for 19.5 years, I said, my voice steady but low, carrying the weight of every memory, every laugh, every tear we had shared. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. The soft flicker of candlelight reflected in her gaze, catching the moisture there, the tiniest glimmer of tears. She laughed, a soft, breathless laugh, and shook her head gently, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. But the warmth in her eyes, the subtle quiver of her lips, told me she felt it deeply. I squeezed her hand, letting the words linger in the quiet room. 19.5 years, and I can honestly say, every single day has been worth it. Every argument, every mistake, every ordinary morning we've shared, it's all led to this moment. Her head tilted slightly, resting against my shoulder for a moment, just as she had in so many of our quiet nights at home. The simple contact, forehead against shoulder, fingers entwined, spoke volumes. There was no need for dramatic gestures, the depth of our bond was in the small, meaningful touches, the shared silence, the gentle warmth of presence. I can't believe it, she whispered finally, a mix of awe and affection. 19.5 years, and somehow, I still fall for you every day. Her words made my chest tighten, a rush of emotion that was more thrilling than any grand romantic gesture could have been. I leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face, letting my thumb trace the line of her cheek, memorizing every detail again, as I always did. She rested her head briefly against my hand, and I felt an unspoken understanding pass between us. 19.5 years didn't just mark time, they marked a life, a shared journey, a love that had matured and deepened with every passing day. In that quiet room, lit by candlelight and filled with the scent of dinner long finished, the emotional peak settled around us. It wasn't just an announcement, it was a celebration of everything we had built, of every ordinary moment that had become extraordinary because we shared it together. I realized then, more clearly than ever, that love wasn't in the grand gestures, it was here, in the softness of a touch, the steadiness of a gaze, and the shared acknowledgement that 19.5 years had only made us stronger, closer, more completely intertwined. And in that lingering, unspoken connection, I knew this anniversary would be remembered, not for its candles, flowers, or table setting, but for the quiet, profound truth of our love finally spoken aloud. The soft glow of the candlelight lingered even as the remnants of our anniversary dinner were cleared away. The room was quiet, but it wasn't empty. There was a warmth that seemed to wrap around us, a gentle hum of shared history and comfort. Her hand still rested in mine, and I could feel the steady pulse of her heartbeat, a rhythm that had become familiar, grounding, and infinitely reassuring over the 19.5 years we had spent together. We sank into the couch, the soft cushions embracing us like old friends, and for a while, words were unnecessary. She leaned slightly against me, her head resting on my shoulder, and I felt the subtle curve of her fingers curling around mine. The silence was full of understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the love we had nurtured, the challenges we had overcome, and the countless ordinary moments that had become extraordinary simply because we shared them. I reflected on the small conflict from earlier in the day, the gentle tension over our anniversary plans. In the calm of the evening, it seemed almost laughable now, a fleeting shadow against the brightness of our connection. The argument had been nothing more than a reminder that even the strongest bonds sometimes need honesty, patience, and vulnerability. And tonight, vulnerability had brought us even closer. She had trusted me with her doubts, and I had answered with reassurance, and together, we had transformed a small misunderstanding into a moment of intimacy and reaffirmation. "I've always noticed you," I whispered, almost to myself, letting the words drift between us. "Every little thing, the way you laugh, the way you move through the world, the way you care without needing recognition. I've noticed it all. Always." Her fingers tightened slightly around mine, and I could feel her smile against my shoulder. "I notice you too," she murmured. "Even after all these years, I still notice you, the small gestures, your nervous glances, the way you try to make me laugh. It's comforting, and it makes me feel loved in ways I can't always put into words." We sat like that for a while, letting the quiet intimacy settle around us. I brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, letting my fingers linger on her cheek, feeling the warmth and softness beneath my touch. She leaned into me slightly, her breath brushing my collarbone, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life we had shared, the love we had cultivated, and the bond that had only strengthened with time. In these quiet moments, I realized something profound: love wasn't about grand declarations or perfect gestures. It was about presence, attentiveness, and the courage to be emotionally open, even after years together. It was in the lingering hand touches, the shared laughter, the mutual support, and the small acknowledgements that life was better simply because we were side by side. As the evening wore on, we held each other a little longer, laughed softly at shared memories, and spoke in whispers about the past, the present, and the subtle hopes for the future. The emotional peak of the announcement had passed, but the warmth it left lingered, wrapping us in a sense of security and belonging. Tonight was more than an anniversary, it was a testament to 19.5 years of love, commitment, and intimacy that had grown quietly, beautifully, and undeniably real. And as I rested my head against hers, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her breath, I knew that this was the essence of our life together, simple, steady, and profoundly enduring. The room had grown quiet, but not empty. The remnants of our anniversary celebration, the faint scent of flowers, the lingering warmth from dinner, the soft flicker of candlelight, wrapped around us like a gentle embrace. She sat close, just close enough that our shoulders brushed, and I could feel the steady warmth of her presence, a comforting anchor after 19.5 years together. We didn't speak immediately. There was no need. The intimacy of our shared silence was enough. I could feel the subtle rise and fall of her chest against mine, the gentle rhythm of her breathing, the reassuring touch of her fingers intertwined with mine. Every detail of her, the soft curve of her cheek, the faint shimmer in her eyes, the grace in her movements, reminded me why, after all these years, my heart still swelled when I looked at her. I can't believe it's been 19.5 years, I whispered finally, my voice low, almost reverent. She tilted her head toward me, her eyes reflecting the candlelight, and smiled softly, a mixture of wonder, warmth, and quiet amusement. Time passes strangely, she replied, her fingers brushing my arm. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but always worth it, with you. There was a pause, a moment suspended in the gentle glow of the evening. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, letting my thumb rest lightly against her cheek. She leaned into the touch, and I could feel the subtle shiver that ran through her, a silent acknowledgement of the bond we had nurtured over nearly 2 decades. It was a connection that didn't need words, just presence, just the quiet assurance that we were here, together, fully and completely. I pulled her into a slow embrace, letting the warmth of her body and the softness of her hair against my chest remind me that this quiet closeness, was what we had spent our lives building. Her arms circled me gently, a mirror of the comfort and love that had grown between us over the years. Every sigh, every heartbeat, every small movement was a testament to a love that had matured and deepened, one that didn't need grand gestures to prove itself. We stayed like that for a long time, letting the room fade around us. Occasionally, our heads would touch lightly, our fingers would tighten together, and small smiles would pass between us, silent words of gratitude, admiration, and quiet joy. I reflected on everything we had shared, the laughter, the arguments, the quiet mornings, the tender nights, and every small gesture of care and affection that had woven our lives together. Finally, as the night drew on and the soft glow of candles flickered against the walls, I whispered into her hair, after 19.5 years, I still fall for you every day. She lifted her head slightly, eyes glistening, and kissed my cheek softly, lingering just long enough for both of us to feel the weight of everything we had been through and everything we would still share. And in that moment, I knew that love, steady and enduring, had the power to transform ordinary days into something extraordinary. 19.5 years weren't just a number, they were a lifetime of connection, growth, and unspoken understanding. And as we held each other, swaying slightly in the quiet of our home, I realized that this was the most lasting impression of all, a love that had endured, deepened, and promised to continue, no matter what years lay ahead.